In this week's episode of PokeClass, we're looking slightly ahead past the release date of Boundaries Crossed to take a look at Blastoise Keldeo, a deck born straight from the set. It features fast energy acceleration and an EX attacker, so it's definitely worth taking a look. Use your annotations on the screen to skip to the parts you'd like to see, or watch the whole episode to get the most out of the analysis. All this and more is in this week's episode of PokeClass, sponsored by Collector's Cash, your #1 place to go for Pokemon sealed products and single cards. Check them out after the show at www.collectorscash.com. Hey everyone, and welcome to episode 93 of PokeClass, and this week we're moving on to a hot topic that's been on everyone's lips recently while in preparation for City Championships coming up in just a few weeks. Cities are actually really good for grabbing a decent chunk of championship points, and they have a decent best finish limit too, so this is going to be another series of decent and hard competition. However, today isn't all about cities, it's going to be all about a new deck that will be born through the release of Boundaries Crossed on the 7th of November, Blastoise Keldeo. Blastoise is back to the metagame with a bang, sporting his classic Rain Dance style ability, and one of the newest Pokemon, Keldeo, comes to the TCG in EX form, ready and waiting to take on the game. Let's have a look at these two cards a little bit closer. So Blastoise is back in the competitive game with its classic ability to move or attach water energy on your side of the field. We have the base set Blastoise with Rain Dance, the one from Fire Red and Leaf Green, the Blastoise from Unleashed with a slightly different ability still involving energy, and now this one which sports pretty much the same thing. The new name for Blastoise's original Rain Dance is Deluge, quite a strange name compared to the Japanese translation, but that's neither here nor there. And what it allows you to do is attach as many water energy from your hand to any of your Pokemon as many times as you like during your turn. So immediately this should remind players more familiar with the most recent format of Emboar, but a version that uses water energy instead, and they are extremely alike apart from the 10 less HP on Blastoise. Something else that may come to mind is how on Earth water can work as a type in a format filled with electric, but the best part about this deck is that all of its water attackers aren't weak to lightning. As you can see, Blastoise is actually weak to grass, not a very popular type in the competitive world at all apart from Shaman EX, which is still a very rarely played card at the moment. So at first glance, Blastoise is looking very interesting, but no energy accelerator is worth playing without a decent array of attackers to be using with it, and this is where Keldeo comes in. Keldeo EX is one of our confirmed new EX cards we'll be receiving in Boundaries Crossed in just a couple of weeks, and is one of our main attackers in the deck, so let's take a closer look. Just looking over the card, you can see the average 170 HP, single ability and attack, as well as a very handy weakness to grass, which we've just mentioned when chatting about Blastoise, which should keep it in check where electric is concerned. The ability is called Rush In, and when used it allows you to switch your current active Pokemon with Keldeo, which doesn't sound all that great at first, but if you look back at Blastoise's retreat cost, you'll see why this is going to be so useful. With Blastoise's maximum 4 retreat cost, it should become your opponent's capture target, but with this ability from Keldeo, their catches almost become useless unless they're taking a prize in the same turn, as you can freely switch out by using Rush In. Moving on to Keldeo's attack called Secret Sword, and it costs 3 colorless energy to do a seemingly low 50 damage. However, if you read the small print, the attack does 20 more damage for each water energy attached to Keldeo. If you cover the cost for the attack with all water energy, you will be doing 110 for 3 energy, which is a very nice amount of damage to do in this format, as it will KO every EX out there right now, even with Eviolite. Pair this attack with Blastoise's Deluge ability and you'll be able to see your strategy fairly clearly. With the help of Blastoise's ability and an incredible start, you could be getting this attack going from turn 2, but if not, you can start setting up those 110 damage attacks in a single turn thanks to Deluge. And don't forget, 110 damage isn't your cap. This attack carries on adding 20 damage for each water energy attached, so the sky is the limit for what you can do with your energy. Now before moving on to the list, I'm going to cover another attacker that you have at your disposal in this very deck, which was once an incredible force in the competitive world, but has almost dropped off the map since, and that is Kyurem from Noble Victories. Kyurem used to be part of many decks, but most notably in Electrode builds, as Kyurem being set up in just one turn, it's very hard to keep up with for any deck, even now, as its attack Glaciate spreads 30 damage to every Pokemon on your opponent's side of the field. With stage 2s already sneaking their way back into the format, this attack has got a lot more powerful and can really pile on the damage when using it turn after turn. With a very nice 130 HP and an outrage attack which does 20 more damage than the amount of damage on Kyurem, you've got yourself a powerful attacker that can really give your opponent some problems. Darkrai is only going to be able to two-shot this guy at best, and Rayquaza will have to get rid of 3 energy, which is a lot of resources to ask of any deck at the moment, just to grab that single prize. However, as Kyurem's Glaciate damage can build up so quickly, your opponent will have to deal with it quickly, or things could get fairly nasty very fast. So now you know the main players in the deck, let's have a look at the skeleton list to get you started on building this new exciting deck. We do have a couple of new cards to look at in the trainer section this time, which will be introduced in Boundaries Crossed, so let's get straight to the list. First up, you obviously have to have your main player Blastoise and at least a 3-1-3 line. 3-1-3 is the lowest you're wanting to go, and if you can find the space, I would always recommend making the line thicker if you can, just because it's such a big part of your deck working out. A nice thing to note about the Squirtle from Boundaries Crossed is that it has an ability called Shell Shield, which prevents all damage done to Squirtle while it's on the bench, which is extremely good against Darkrai in the early game, as it adds that protection from getting 2 Squirtles knocked out at the same time, or 1 sniped on the bench. This is actually a very strong aspect to the Stage 2 line and will help you out a lot in buying time that you need to get Blastoise into play. Up next are your attackers, which are Keldeo, Kyurem and Mewtwo, all Pokemon that can make the most of Deluge from Blastoise. Keldeo has the ability we talked about earlier, which saves Blastoise from the active position, and it also has a pretty strong attack which is powered up fast and can hit pretty hard. Kyurem we've also talked about extensively already, as it can also be set up in just 1 turn thanks to Blastoise, and Glaciate is a really strong attack early on to get those KOs on weaker Pokemon and just soften up EXs ready for Keldeo's attack later on. And then we move on to Mewtwo, who is going to be a strong inclusion because it is probably the most versatile attacker that you can take advantage of Blastoise's ability, as X-Ball can really bring the pain to any Pokemon when you have the power to load as many energy as available to you in just a single turn. Mewtwo is always best when sprung out of nowhere on an unsuspecting opponent, and it can really win you games when you can sweep up 2 EXs over 2 turns. All of these are easily the best attackers out there for this deck, and they all have their own uses as the game progresses, so all good points from the Pokemon lines, the numbers of which you can chop and change depending on which attacker you personally feel like using the most. Moving on to your trainers cards, and we start off with the traditional 4 Juniper and 4 N, both of which are the staple draw cards in the current format. After that I've put in 4 Cheren, but as always, the toss up between running this or Bianca is going to be down to the player. Even though I have a maximum amount of Ultra Ball in the list, I do prefer having Cheren just for that straight up draw of 3 cards in the early game when playing your hand down, and sacrificing resources isn't really what you want to be doing, especially when it comes to setting up stage 2s. However, with 4 Ultra Ball, Bianca is definitely a strong option too, so it's down to the player with that choice. And to finish up the supporter line, we have a new card, Skylar, at 2 copies. Skylar is a new supporter to be given to us in Boundaries Crossed, and many players are still unsure about it, but I feel that this deck, being stage 2 based, can really take advantage of what it does. What Skylar allows you to do is search for 1 trainer card from your deck and place it into your hand, and just to avoid confusion, this does mean you can grab either a supporter, item or tool from your deck with this card. On the surface, it seems quite mediocre, but there are plenty of times in the game, especially when running stage 2s, that you're just missing that 1 card to get your strategy really rolling, and this card could be the one behind it all. The downside to running this, however, is that it can mess up your random receivers if you play those, since you will probably want to be drawing a supporter from it, and I feel that Skylar is only really that strong if you have a decent hand already. There's just missing that 1 card to get going. If you don't have another supporter to follow up your turn, your Skylar is most likely going to become another supporter, making it considerably weaker. Overall, I'm a little bit on the fence about this card, but on paper, it just seems to make sense in stage 2 based decks. If you decide to keep it in or not, that is up to you. After this, you have 4 Ultra Ball, as you want to be grabbing as many basics as possible in the early game, and then those attackers and stage 2 Blastoise later down the line. Discarding heavily in any stage 2 deck is going to be tough, so it is going to be a card you need to get used to managing your resources with, but it's the best Pokemon search we have out there at the moment. This is then followed up with the 4 rare candy that you're going to need to get Blastoise out and raining energy on your field, and I feel that 4 is a nice number even though you have a 3-1-3 line of Blastoise, since you can up the power of Skylar by drawing into the rare candy more naturally and then search out the other pieces with your Skylar. And to follow that up, we then have the obvious 4 Pokemon catcher to drag up what you want to KO, as with any other deck in the competitive world right now. Up next we have 2 Energy Retrieval, which is a card you definitely don't see much anymore with all the energy acceleration we have from the discard pile at the moment, but this deck is certainly going to need it. The aim of this deck is to accelerate energy from the hand, so you're going to need a way to get that energy back when you suffer KOs throughout the game, and this is the best we've got at the moment. Being able to grab 2 energy from the discard pile will keep your energy flowing nicely, and will also give you the ability to get another attacker onto the board pretty much straight away to keep the pressure on your opponent. After this, you've got the big card of Boundaries Crossed, Computer Search, a new staple card for every deck out there at the moment. There's a reason this card is an A-Spec trainer, meaning you can only have 1 in your deck by the way, and that's because it is that good. Computer Search allows you to discard 2 cards from your hand and search your deck for any card and place it into your hand, exactly the same as the base set version from all that time ago. This card is really good in a stage 2 deck as well, for the same reason that Skylar is in getting you that second part of the puzzle needed to get you stage 2 part of the strategy out as soon as possible. Not only can this card grab you your initial strategy, but can also grab you anything else to help you get an amazing turn off to tip the game severely in your favour. A great card that I'm definitely looking forward to see in a competitive format. And finally we have a single Super Rod, which can be bumped up to 2 if you really need some more recovery in the deck. Super Rod is there for what it always has been for, keeping your Pokemon in the deck rather than the discard pile when they finally get KO'd. This is also another way to keep energy in a thin deck by the late game, which you will definitely need if the game is running very late. Just another card to boost consistency, which we all like to see. And that is pretty much your skeleton list for Blastoise Keldeo, as well as the strategy behind it to give you a heads up on what this deck is looking like before we head to cities very soon. As for some ideas to fill the space in the list, you can always go for things like Eviolite to keep your Keldeo in play for that little bit longer, and maybe Tool Scrapper to make sure that your Kyurem is spreading as much damage as it possibly can without having to worry about your opponent's Eviolites. Another interesting card you could play is Silent, which allows you to grab 3 basic energy from your deck. Hopefully you can see how powerful this could be to give you a huge advantage the turn that you play it, by racking up your damage a hell of a lot in terms of Keldeo, but it can also get you another attacker on the board in an instant. Definitely consider this card, but I wouldn't put in more than 1, maybe 2 at a push, as it will harm your consistency a little bit. One final choice you have is to include double colourless energy to make sure that you can attack with Keldeo as quickly as possible, and it also gives a little bit more strength to Mewtwo when it comes to Mewtwo Wars. This is definitely something I will be trying out, and you should keep it in mind for those quicker starts. Other than those small choices, this list is pretty much ready to take on the format as we know it right now, but whether it will prevail is another thing, and the answer won't be apparent until cities finally come around. So thank you for watching episode 93 of PokeClass. Make sure you like, favourite and comment down below of any feelings you have about the deck or any cool ideas you have for it. If you haven't already, then please hit that subscribe button for regular Pokemon TCG videos. Thanks again for watching, and I hope you all have a great week.